Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ever wondered what really keeps a major city ticking, or how, a multi-billion-dollar budget actually gets managed day to day?
Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on exactly that, focusing on Augusta, Georgia. We're diving into the complex world of local government.
You've shared some amazing source material with us, this really comprehensive meeting transcript from Augusta's Charter Review Committee.
That's right. And our mission here is to basically distill what's going on. We want to unpack the core functions, the challenges they're facing, and some pretty surprising financial realities of Augusta's consolidated government.
All straight from the folks on the ground. Think of this as your inside track to understanding how a major city works.
Exactly. We'll look at the city administrator's role, try to demystify that huge budget figure, and even touch on the history that makes Augusta's government structure, well, unique.
Yeah, get ready for some aha moments about how these local decisions really do affect you. Let's jump in.
Okay, so where do we start?
Let's kick things off right at the nerve center of Augusta's government, the administrator's office.
Right. And our focus here is Mika Allen, Augusta's administrator. She's been in this role, or at least involved at that level, for over 25 years. She gave the committee a really good overview of her office and what she's responsible for now.
And what really jumped out from the source material is her reporting structure. It's kind of unusual, isn't it?
It really is. She reports directly to the mayor and the Augusta-Richmond County Commission.
So that means, what, 11 bosses?
11 bosses, effectively, yeah. Now, just imagine trying to move forward on something significant, maybe controversial, when you need alignment from 11 different people.
Wow. Yeah, the material definitely suggested this dynamic could, well, slow things down, maybe even lead to decision paralysis sometime.
Definitely creates challenges.
So with 11 bosses, what's the actual scope of her job? It must be huge.
Oh, it's vast. I mean, overseeing the day-to-day operations and administration, making sure everything lines up with local ordinances, state laws, federal laws, plus directives from the commission itself.
And managing departments too, right? Like planning, staffing.
Exactly. Planning, organizing, staffing for the departments under her direct purview. She also has to advise the mayor and commission on the city's financial health, future needs, make recommendations.
And the budget.
Yeah, prepares it, submits it, executes it, plus providing all the documentation for commission meeting agendas, attending all the meetings. It's a massive portfolio.
And her office reflects that size.
Yeah.
The source mentioned deputy administrators, an assistant administrator, communications manager, assistants, open records, 311, even a grants writer. This whole team.
It is a comprehensive setup.
But given that structure, how does she actually ensure accountability across all those departments? Did the committee dig into any challenges there?
That's a really critical point they discussed. So she oversees departmental activities, especially around budget prep and spending for the non-elected department heads. And a key thing she's working on now is developing performance evaluations for those department heads.
Okay, so performance evaluations. But that leads to the big question, right?
Right.
Where does the actual power lie?
Precisely. And this is really crucial for understanding how things work, or sometimes maybe don't work as quickly as you'd expect.
Go on.
Well, the administrator, she can recommend hiring, firing, or disciplinary action for department heads. But the final decision, that rests with the governing body, the commission.
Ah, so she can document performance issues, set up improvement plans, PIPs, right? But she can't actually pull the trigger herself.
Exactly. She can't unilaterally implement disciplinary action. And one committee member flat out called this a weakness, described her hands as basically tied if she needs to take quick action.
Which could lead to, what was the phrase? Dead weight.
Yeah, potentially dead weight in departments if she can't get a commission majority to back a personnel change. Another member really stressed that the administrator needs more direct power, especially because commission members turn over relatively frequently. They felt a stronger, more consistent leadership hand was needed from the administrator's office.
Okay. It sounds like her office is well aware of these structural challenges, though, and they're actively trying to modernize.
Absolutely. The push is clearly towards being more responsive to citizens, improving transparency, big one there, implementing performance metrics, and making decisions based on data.
Data-driven decisions.
Yeah. The administrator mentioned her background in technology fuels that focus, and there was a concrete example given of her office's effectiveness.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
Hurricane Helen cleanup.
Yeah.
A committee member praised the office for doing a tremendous job. They got debris removal started in just 5 or 6 days.
Wow, that's fast compared to...
Much faster than surrounding counties, apparently. So it shows, when things align, that office can be very effective. It has real-world impact.
Okay, so we've seen the nuts and bolts of the administrator's office.
Yeah,
A huge job, but with some real constraints on power.
definitely.
Now, let's connect that to the city's money, because often how the money flows dictates where those power dynamics really play out.
Makes sense. Moving from the nerve center to the purse strings.
Exactly. Augusta's multi-billion-dollar budget. We heard from Dr. Rex Facer from the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. He's an expert in public finance.
Right, and he gave the committee a really good high-level overview.
Yeah.
His main point up front was government budgeting. It's not like your household budget. Not at all.
A crucial distinction. And he outlined some key principles, right? 5 best practices.
He did. 5 key issues that should drive how local governments budget. First, a long-term perspective. Avoid those quick fixes that might cause problems down the road.
Okay, think long term. What else?
Second, linkages to organizational goals. Basically, make sure the spending connects directly to what the city is trying to achieve. Third, a sharp focus on results and outcomes. Measure the impact. Don't just track how much you spent.
Measure impact, not just inputs. Got it. Number 4.
Effective communication. That means engaging with everyone, internal staff, external stakeholders, the public. Keep people informed.
Makes sense. And the 5th.
The 5th is incentives. This is about encouraging the best use of funds, like finding ways to stop those, year-end spending sprees.
Ah, yes, the use it or lose it problem, where departments rush to spend whatever's left in the budget so it doesn't get cut next year.
Exactly. So finding incentives to prevent that. It's a common challenge.
Okay, so those are the guiding principles. Now, you mentioned government budgeting is different. A core concept is fund accounting.
Yes, fund accounting. It's fundamental. Basically, government money is segregated for specific purposes. Think of it like having different envelopes or bank accounts for different things.
Like one for groceries, one for rent, one for vacation saving.
Exactly. You wouldn't accidentally pay your rent out of your vacation fund, right? Government finance operates on that same principle, just, on a much bigger scale with strict legal rules separating those funds. Those are like hard walls between the money buckets.
Okay, so what are the main types of funds in Augusta? There's the general fund.
Right, the general fund. That's for your typical day-to-day government operations and general revenues like property taxes. But what's interesting and kind of unique about Augusta is they actually have 2 separate general funds.
2.
Yeah, one for general government stuff and another one specifically for law enforcement.
Huh, okay.
What else? Then you have enterprise funds. These operate more like businesses. They charge fees to cover their own costs.
Like the water department or the airport.
Perfect examples. Water and sewage, the airport. They're generally expected to be self-sustaining, not subsidized by general taxes.
Okay, then there are special revenue funds.
Yep, special revenue funds. Here, the money coming in is legally restricted for very specific purposes. Think federal ARPA money, that's the American Rescue Plan Act funding, or local SPLST funds, the special purpose sales tax. That money has to be spent on what it was designated for.
Can't mix it with the general pot.
Correct. And then, a really big one, capital projects funds.
Right, these are for the big-ticket, long-lasting items.
Exactly. Roads, bridges, maybe major building renovations, heavy equipment. Dr. Facer used a good analogy. It's the difference between buying milk at the store and buying a new car. You finance and think about that car purchase very differently because it's a long-term investment.
Okay, makes sense. And the last type.
Trust and agency funds. These are fiduciary funds, basically money held by the government. For others, think employee pensions for future obligations.
And Georgia law has rules about balancing these budgets.
It does. Mandates balanced budgets for general, special revenue, and debt service funds. And for capital projects, the financing plan has to match the useful life of the project up to a maximum of 30 years. You can't, say, issue 30-year bonds to buy police cars that only last 5 years.
Right, the financing needs to match the asset's lifespan. Okay, so that's the structure.
Yeah.
What did Augusta's actual budget look like? You mentioned billions.
Yeah, big numbers. For fiscal year 2024, the total appropriations hit $1.57 billion. That was unusually high, though.
Why high?
Mainly due to significant one-time money like that federal ARPA funding, and also expenses related to the Hurricane Helen cleanup were factored in there.
Okay, so one-time bumps. What about the current year, FY25?
Significantly lower, as you'd expect. It dropped to $1.35 billion. That reflects those one-time funds going away. And they also apparently lost about $7 million in anticipated ARPA money they were counting on.
Ouch.
Yeah. So Dr. Facer suggested this $1.35 billion figure might be closer to Augusta's, let's call it natural level of annual spending without those temporary boosts.
So when we talk about that $1.35 billion total budget, where is most of that money actually going? Is it all property tax dollars funding daily services?
Not even close, actually, and this is really crucial to understand. The vast majority isn't the general tax dollars you might think of first.
Right.
For FY25, the single largest chunk, nearly a third of the whole budget, around $400 million, goes into that capital projects fund. Roads, bridges, infrastructure.
$400 million on capital projects. Wow. What's next biggest?
Water and sewage. That's an enterprise fund, remember? Self-funded through user fees. That's about $199 million.
Okay, so that's not general tax money either.
Right. Then you have debt service paying off past borrowing at about $127 million. Then comes the main general fund at $126 million.
So the general fund is only the fourth largest category.
In this snapshot, yes. After that, you have special revenue funds at $140 million, the separate law enforcement general fund at around $78 million, and the airport enterprise fund at about $70 million.
So wait, if you add the two general funds together, regular and law enforcement, that's what? Just over $200 million out of $1.35 billion?
Roughly, yeah. About 15% of the total budget.
Only 15%. That's striking. So the big story isn't necessarily daily operating costs funded by property tax, it's infrastructure investment and utilities.
Exactly. Capital spending and those self-funded enterprise operations make up the bulk of Augusta's overall financial picture. It's probably a different picture than many residents assume.
Definitely shifts the perspective. Now, looking just at that general fund piece, where does its money come from?
The key revenue sources, making up well over half, maybe 57–58%, are property taxes, the local option sales tax, LSEST, the title ad valorem tax, or TAVT.
That's the tax on car purchases, right?
Yeah, essentially a one-time tax when you buy a new or used car in Georgia. And the fourth big one is the electric franchise tax. Those four are the heavy hitters for the general fund.
Okay, so that's the income side of the general fund. Where does that money get spent? Any surprises there?
Well, law enforcement and fire protection combined are over $100 million. Law enforcement alone typically eats up 30–40% of the general fund budget.
That's a huge slice.
It is. And about 60% of that law enforcement spending is just personnel salaries, benefits. After public safety, the next biggest chunk is judicial services at $29 million. Then cultural and recreation, think parks, programs, support for nonprofits, that's about $16 million.
Okay. Who else?
There are operating transfers out at $12 million. That's basically money moved from the general fund to support other specific funds or departments, maybe for dedicated projects.
Gotcha. Moving money between those wallets we talked about.
Sort of, yeah. And then what really stood out and sparked questions from the committee was the line item for health and general welfare.
How much is that?
Only $1.8 million.
$1.8 million out of a $126 million general fund. That seems low.
It does seem low on the surface. It prompted discussion about the budget's balance. Now, it's important context, as was pointed out, that the Maine Department of Public Health operations are largely state-funded, and the school system is totally separate. So those major health and education costs aren't in Augusta's city budget.
Okay, that context helps. But still, $1.8 million for general welfare.
It raised eyebrows, and it connects back to that huge law enforcement cost.
How so?
Well, the source material indicated that a really large portion of police encounters are actually related to substance abuse or mental health crises.
Right, not necessarily traditional crime.
Exactly. So there's this significant belief reflected in the discussion that you could potentially tame those high law enforcement costs by shifting strategies.
Like what?
Like maybe having behavioral health professionals respond alongside, or even instead of officers for certain calls, or treating homelessness more as a public health or substance abuse issue rather than just a criminal justice problem. The idea is that could lead to better outcomes and be more cost-effective in the long run.
Interesting thought. A different approach. Yeah. Okay, one last budget item mentioned. Stormwater fees. What's the deal there?
Yeah, stormwater. Those fees are generally based on impermeable surfaces.
Impermeable, like parking lots?
Yeah.
Rooftops?
Exactly. Surfaces that don't absorb rainwater, causing runoff that the city's infrastructure, pipes, drains, treatment has to manage. Because these surfaces increase runoff, the properties pay a fee based on how much impermeable area they have.
And this applies to everyone, even nonprofits?
Generally, yes. Because even tax-exempt properties contribute to runoff, so the fee helps cover the infrastructure costs associated with managing that stormwater. It's usually seen as a fee for service, not a tax.
Okay, got it. So the budget shapes what Augusta can do. But all these decisions, the administrator's authority, how funds get allocated, they're ultimately guided by Augusta's foundational document, its charter.
Right, the city's constitution, essentially.
And that very blueprint is under the microscope right now. Which brings us to the charter review process itself. How is that committee navigating things?
Well, first, they've set up rules for public input, similar to how the main Augusta Commission operates.
Okay, like time limits.
Yeah. Public speakers get 5 minutes, and the chair enforces that. You have to sign up in advance, usually by Monday morning for a Thursday meeting, using a specific form.
And you can't just keep coming back every week on the same topic.
Nope. Once you speak on a subject, there's a 60 or 90-day cooling-off period before you can address the committee on that same issue again.
Okay. And comments happen at the start of meetings.
Regular public comments, yes. But if they hold a specific public hearing on a topic, you don't need to sign up in advance for those.
All right. Now, there was some confusion or maybe controversy about the actual document they're reviewing, the charter document.
Yeah, that was a really interesting point raised. A member of the public came forward and basically said, hey, this 160-page document you're using, that's not the real charter.
Oh, so what do they say the real charter was?
They argued the actual legally binding charter is the original 30-page consolidation bill from 1995, House Bill 805. And that only one section, Article 5, within that bigger document the committee has, represents the true charter. The rest, they claimed, was just expounding details added later.
So how did the committee respond to that? What did their lawyers say?
The committee's attorney clarified things. He explained that, yes, there's the original Consolidation Act, that 1995 bill, but then there was also a subsequent adoption of a charter that expanded on its provisions, fleshed things out.
So they're reviewing both.
Essentially, yes. The attorney confirmed that the committee's official charge, based on the resolution that created them and communications with the city government, is to review both the act and the adopted charter provisions. It really highlights just how unique Augusta's situation is.
Because of that consolidation history.
Exactly. A former commissioner provided some really valuable context on this. Augusta is one of only 4 consolidated governments in Georgia. Its structure is fundamentally different from almost every other city in the state.
And that consolidation back in 96, after the 95 bill, it wasn't just about efficiency, was it? There were deeper reasons.
According to the testimony, no, it wasn't just about bureaucracy. It was driven by some serious issues of disparity and unequal treatment within the city at the time. There was even a formal disparity study that showed discrimination against women and minority-owned businesses.
Wow. So the charter itself was partly intended to address those foundational social equity issues.
That seems to be a key part of its origin story. And apparently there have been multiple attempts over the years to change the consolidation structure, even talk of certain areas wanting to pull out or deconsolidate. So there's ongoing tension there.
Which makes this review process even more critical.
Yeah.
But also potentially contentious. And that brings us to the timeline. There seemed to be some debate about when they need to finish.
Yeah, the timeline dilemma. The official resolution that created the committee gives them until March 2026 to finish their recommendations, with even a possibility of extension if needed.
Okay, so March 2026 is the formal deadline, but there's pressure to finish sooner.
Seems so. There's an informal goal floating around to try and wrap things up by the end of 2025.
Why the end of 2025?
2 main reasons mentioned. First, to align with the state legislature's session, which typically starts around January 10th. Any changes requiring state law updates would need to be ready. Second, for a potential May 2026 election ballot for any local charter changes that need voter approval.
Okay, but is that realistic? Finishing by December 2025.
Well, the folks from the Carl Vinson Institute pointed out that just drafting the final formal report takes a good chunk of time, 4 to 8 weeks, after the committee actually finishes making all its recommendations.
So hitting that December deadline to get something on a May ballot, that would be really tight, cutting it close.
Very close. And several committee members voiced strong concerns about rushing it. They argued that pushing for that earlier deadline could compromise the quality and thoroughness of their work.
Especially since it's been, 30 years since the last big review?
Exactly. Their point was, this is a huge deal, setting the course for potentially decades. Let's take the time needed to get it right for Augusta's future generations, not rush just to meet an arbitrary earlier date.
A classic tension. Speed versus thoroughness. Meanwhile, what were the citizens saying during public comments? What were their main concerns?
The community voices really underscored how important this whole process is. There were calls for things like surveys to better understand what the public actually needs, and pleas for direct engagement with citizens.
Specific issues.
Concerns about that balanced budget issue came up again, especially that low funding for health and welfare compared to other areas. And a general theme of needing to streamline government, cut duplication, make sure taxpayer money is actually reaching the citizens and addressing problems effectively.
And how did the committee members respond to that?
They seem to take it very seriously. They affirmed their commitment to being thorough, to recommending changes that will streamline things, eliminate waste, and ensure funds are used proficiently to tackle those community problems.
Okay. Wow. That was quite a deep dive into Augusta's governmental machinery.
It really was. We unpacked the administrator's complex role, that whole 11 bosses situation.
Right, and demystified that multi-billion-dollar budget, understanding where the money really goes, beyond just the general fund.
And navigated the history, the consolidation background, and the procedural complexities of this charter review they're undertaking right now.
Understanding these structures, fund accounting, limited administrative power, the consolidation history, it's not just trivia, is it?
Not at all. It's about empowering you, the listener, to really grasp the real-world decisions happening in your community, how they shape services, how your tax dollars get used.
It really shows how that governance blueprint, the charter, directly impacts daily life.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up, here's something to think about. We've seen this clear desire in Augusta for modernization, for efficiency, for data-driven decisions. But it's running up against the weight of history, that unique consolidation, and also this very valid desire for a thorough, inclusive review process.
Yeah, that tension is palpable.
So the provocative thought for you is this. What do you think is the most challenging balancing act for any local government? Is it achieving swift, decisive action? Or is it ensuring thoughtful, inclusive progress, even if it takes longer? Something to ponder until our next deep dive.